Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Future Trends Forum. I'm very, very glad to see all of you here today. My name is Brian Alexander. I'm the chief organizer, cat herder, MC for the forum. And I'm very glad to see so many of you here today for what is, unfortunately, a very powerful and urgent subject for our time. So, before we proceed, let me introduce the forum, explain where it came from, how things work, and then we can get started. So to begin with, you should know that the forum is the video discussion-based outgrowth of a monthly trends analysis called the Future Trends in Technology and Education. Tara, if you could hit the next slide, please. The FTTE report looks at current trend lines from the previous month and analyzes them against a battery of about 83 trends that we've been tracking for many years now. And we put all that together so we can extrapolate towards the future where technology and education are going. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, just go to ftte.us, download some sample copies, and sign up if you like. Now, a key point about this conversation that's especially important today is to remember that this is not simply when we think about the future of education and technology, it's not simply a local or even national phenomenon. It's really an international one. This is one where we have to be thinking about how technology and education intersect across regions, across nations, across all kinds of boundaries. And it's important to recognize that we've had participants in the forum from just about every continent in the world, from Australia, East Asia, Central Asia, Europe, all across North and South America. And even today, we're talking about what seems to be a uniquely or specifically American subject. It's vital to have as much conversation, as much input, and as we possibly can from around the world. Now, we can only do all this work with the support of you and some other people, and I just want to acknowledge them, and then I want to explain the technology. So first, I want to thank NYSERDAT from upstate New York, or from New York State. They're a terrific nonprofit that helps connect museums, libraries, colleges, and universities to the internet. They've done great work, and we're very grateful for their support. We're also grateful to Shindig, because as you can tell, Shindig has provided the technology that makes this work. And let me just explain the technology if you're new to it. This is a video conference platform that emphasizes discussion, and it does so in a unique way. So let me just show you a few of the key parts. Where I am right now, and where these slides are, just for a minute, this is called the stage. And that's called because everyone here can see and hear us up on stage, and you'll be able to join us up on stage. I'll show you how that works. Right below us is what I think of the audience swarm. So right now I can look down and see Jeff Young holding his chin, looking very thoughtful, now a bit terrified that I'm calling him out. And you can see a whole bunch of people like Martha and Bill and even a very well-dressed Tom Hames. So as you see those people, each represented by a black silhouette or by a video feed or by a photo, you'll see them move slightly as people move back and forth, much like you're looking at people in an audience. If you'd like to have a conversation with somebody, simply double-click on their icon. Now, if they'd like to talk to you, your two icons will snap together like Lego bricks, and you'll have your own private audiovisual conversation, a kind of bubble, which is pretty handy. Now, that's one way for you to talk to each other. There are actually 3 different ways built in where you can communicate with us. I'll just show you them because this is a conversation medium. If you look at the very bottom of the screen, you'll see a white strip that has a series of icons on it. The second from the left is a text chat box. So if you click that, you can chat to the roughly 18 or so people nearest you in the interface. That's a good way to have informal conversation and also to surface ideas, or, as Tom says, to make jokes about the Blues Brothers. Now, if you'd like to text a question that everybody can see and you'd like me to read it out loud, hit that question mark. Then you can type in a question or a comment. We'll flash it on the screen, and I'll read it out loud. Now, if your camera is working and your mic is working, and you've had a good connection and you feel like talking out loud, click the raised hand icon. Then we can teleport you up on stage, and everybody will have a chance to be able to hear you and see you. That sounds a little complicated. It's actually really easy and very quick to do. So those are 3 ways for you to share your thoughts, your ideas, your reflections, depending on your comfort level and where your technology is. And if that's not enough, you can also go to Twitter and just use the hashtag FTTE, and we'll be tracking that as we go. Now, besides NYSERDAT, besides Shindig, we have one other source of support, and I just want to thank the people who have done that, and I want to invite you, if you haven't participated. It's called Patreon. And Patreon is like Kickstarter, but not for a project, but for a creative person. So if you go to patreon.com/Brian Alexander, you'll see dozens of people who sign on to support my work in the future of education. If you haven't, take a look. You'll see people who have contributed as little as $1 a month to keep the lights on and to keep everything humming along. We're very grateful to those Patreons, and we hope you join them. Now, that's a lot of background that's necessary in order to proceed. Today, we have an unusual Future Trends forum. If you haven't been here before, normally we have a guest. So we may be somebody, some people who are on the session right now, like the awesome Jeff Young. But today we're doing something a little unusual. This is a community forum. So I'll be the MC, but the guests are you. Any of your ideas, your questions, and your comments. And so we want to make sure that you get to take the stage. I have a stack of questions to get you going, but I'm sure you have a whole bunch of ideas. Why we're doing this is because of the extraordinary events in Charlottesville a few days ago. So you're all aware of that, just to get everyone on the same page. At the home base of the University of Virginia, there was a massive march of right-wing extremists, primarily neo-Nazis and neo-Confederates. In the middle of all of that, there was a lot of low-level violence, punching and beatings. The climax of it was when a 20-year-old man drove a car into a crowd and killed a young activist. Alongside that, there were also a crash of a helicopter which killed 2 police officers. This has electrified the nation, partly, and the world, partly because of the death caused by right-wing extremists, as far as we can tell, partly because of President Trump's bizarre and offensive responses, but also because of the specter of seeing in the heart of one of our major universities shadows of something from the 1930s or 1940s. What I'd like is for us to share our thoughts about this. I'd like to hear what you think. What does this mean for education? And what does this mean for the future of education? What can we learn? What pointers do we have? Now, please, I want this to be open to a variety of perspectives, and we support everyone who wants to speak. But if anybody gets abusive, I reserve the right to warn and or boot you. This is a very, very contentious and fraught subject. So I'd like to hear from people. And I would especially like to hear from people who are in some ways connected to the event. So if we have people who are from Virginia, people who were involved at UVA, people who are connected to people who were there, or if you were there yourself. So let me just begin by throwing this open. Would anyone like to make a statement or an observation? Now, again, you can do this by clicking the raised hand button, so I can bring you right on stage, or you can click the question mark, type in a question or a comment, and I'll bring that up. So does anyone have an opening statement or opening comment they'd like to begin with? If you just want to hop on stage, by the way, right now we just opened the join podium button. So if you see that over here to my right, just click that and you'll be teleported on up. Greetings, Danielle. Hello from Boston. To begin with, we have a comment from Kate Herzog, who says, it's interesting to look at the coverage of Charlottesville in Google search and its other tabs. Also to reflect on how much this has dominated your Facebook newsfeed. I don't know if by your Facebook newsfeed, Kate, you're referring to mine personally or to everyone's in general. There's been a hefty amount of conversation on my own Facebook page for this. And yes, Charlottesville has become a flashpoint. It's really, really become very, very widespread. Thank you, Kate. Thank you for chiming in. And greetings from South Carolina. I hope you're not too hot down there. This is interesting, and it's a good point. This has really become a major, major story. Does anyone else have an opening statement that they would like to run with, or an observation based on their experience and what they're seeing? Kristin Palmer has a good question. Does anyone have suggestions on what we should have done at UVA with online learning? I'm in charge of our open education resources, and it'd be good to get input in this area. That's a great question, Kristin. I don't want to be the one to answer everyone's question. I want to throw this back at everybody. Just one quick note. There's a Charlottesville syllabus hashtag on Twitter that might have good resources. How about the rest of you? What do you think? How should online education respond? Do you think this is a case for more online education? Are there digital resources that we should be pointing out, say for history or for politics? Just to keep Danielle's ball rolling, we had a comment from George Station in California, one of the California State University systems, along these lines. And he was wondering if traditional educational technology organizations like ISTE or EDUCAUSE have made any statements about this. So that's another way of responding to Daniel's question. I haven't heard anything yet, but I haven't really had a chance to hunt them down. We do have a response on Twitter from forum stalwart Vanessa Vale, who says that at the University of Virginia, there is a UVA collection, and she links this out. It's on Digo. Let me just pull this up in one window, and I can share it if you'd like. Yeah, this is a collection of tabs that include stories on how are we supposed to be safer on campus protests? Did UVA miss signs of looming violence? Why universities are likely or unlikely to punish students at a rally? Sociologists looking at ways of analyzing threats to different commentators. That's a really rich response. Thank you, Vanessa. Danielle, I hope that's one good answer to your question. Tara, why don't you flash up another text comment, please? Okay, comes back. Another reason to focus on news literacy at all levels of education. Absolutely, Kate. That's a crucial point. How we get our news. I mean, this is one of the staples of media literacy dating back to the 60s and 70s. Kate, if you want to share any resources or any examples of that, please feel free to. That's a really good point. Tom asks a cryptic question. This is Tom Hames from Texas on the discussion board about a recent blog post. Tom, do you want to join us on stage so you can unfold that a little bit more? I think it's your question about social media. Hello, Tom. How's your audio? Perfect.
I'm fine.
Perfect.
Can you hear me? Great.
Beautifully.
Well, I mean, it's just, this gets back to the thing we've been talking about for the last couple of years now about fake news and all the competing narratives that are out there. I have been having long and heated discussions with a friend who sees another side of this, and it's frustrating because there's a whole narrative out there around the alt-left narrative, so to speak, that there was, and this is what the president was referring to as well, even though there's very little evidence to support this, and yet in some worlds that seems entirely plausible, and people think they're not necessarily defending the Nazis, but they're defending people's right to free speech, and the fact that there's a dangerous left out there. There's this narrative that's floating around out there in general. I mean, there was an article in the Atlantic a week or two ago around this, and there's stupid people on all sides, and so it's always easy to pull out anecdotal evidence. But if you look at the statistics, yeah, okay, right. As a scholar of Germany and Europe, and looking at the rise of Hitler, the frightening thing for me, and I don't want to overstate this because it's a different environment, weaker government, even more economic distress, but that was a common thing. I mean, they instigated fights with the socialist gangs and the right-wing gangs, instigated fights in the streets of Berlin in 1930, and the right said, well, we're going to come in and reestablish order because we are the party of order. And so, it's like all of these different competing narratives are out there. And in terms of your your blog from the other day about YouTube, and the New York Times article about YouTube, it was very clear to me from reading that those two media are speaking completely past each other. And even, today, people really don't understand how this stuff works. And, Twitter is not news. And yet you turn on the news and all they're doing is reading people's tweets. I mean, for Christ's sake, that's, there's a lot of depth in a tweet, right? Some more than others.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me just,
apologize
you for a second. Let me just walk you back a bit. Tom's referring to a blog post I did criticizing a New York Times piece about right-wing groups on YouTube. And this was an article which was pointing out accurately that there are a lot of right-wing commentators on YouTube who which some of them have a large following. And by right wing, we mean alt-right or extreme right. And I was very critical of the article because I think it was badly argued and made a lot of bad mistakes. I just shared that link on the chat box. Tom, can we hold you there for a second? Because I want to.
Sure.
There are a couple of comments that come in. I want to make sure you get a whack at them too. First, just Kate shared a great blog post by Lisa Nielsen called "A Common Sense Approach to Talking to Students About Charlottesville," and so that's there in the chat box, and I'll share it on Twitter in a bit. Van Davis offers a different comment. So it doesn't speak to the social media piece, but there was an interesting study published in December 2015 showed that individuals with broadband access increased political polarization. This is a piece from Wiley entitled "The Hostile Audience: The Effect of Access to Broadband Internet on Partisan Effect." So that would be a case for increasing broadband, perhaps coupled with social media, increasing partisan divides. Fred offers a competing point of view. So there are tools for visualizing arguments that help people understand opposing points of view. Quite true. Social media tools seem to encourage people to simply seek approbation. So the technology perhaps can cut either way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're lonely and dispossessed, it gives you a voice that you don't otherwise have. You don't have to assassinate the czar anymore to get noticed. If you just scream something provocative enough out there, eventually, in theory, people will notice you, and they will. Those of like mind will come and affirm your beliefs, and those who object to you will scream at you, and then there you go. You don't even have to be in the same state or even the same country.
Do you think we're seeing the rise of a new political ecosystem as a result, with the extreme right getting validated by this kind of technology?
No, because I think there are a relatively small bunch of losers who are being empowered in some ways that are, there's. If you look at the way it worked in Germany, the Nazis were also a fairly small group altogether, but they did get 40% of the vote in 1932. I don't see that happening here in any way, shape, or form. The people who voted for Trump, especially the ones that gave him the margins in those critical states, which put him over the electoral college edge, definitely have that dispossessed thing. The thing you posted as well about the impact of robotics and stuff. That's, there are desperate voices out there. And ironically, in some ways, the current administration and policy things that are happening with Congress are making those voices even more desperate. Which, is that a bad thing for them or not? I don't know. And that's what's scary, is that you could actually make it worse and at the same time make yourself look better, in the same way that Hitler's thugs made it worse in 1930 and made themselves look better in comparison. So it's a frame of reference I understand, because I've spent, one of my master's degrees is in it. But and I don't want to make too many comparisons. It's just something I happen to know fairly well. There are other examples out there in history, but getting people to fight each other is a good political strategy in some environments.
What's the old American expression? Let's him and you fight. Tom, one of the reasons I want to bring you up is because of your dual background. Both you are deeply skilled and immersed in educational change and technology, but also your background in government and politics. Please stick around up here for a couple of minutes, because we have a couple more questions. Sure. Tara, do you want to flash up the next text question? This is from Bill Bateman. Hi, Bill. I think the level of intensity from all involved will make this a highly volatile issue to deal with online and on campus. I think that's absolutely true, Bill. Well, let me ask a question for everybody. And Tom, since you're here, you can think about this. By the way, we've got Tom and I here. In between us, on average, we have maybe one normal male head of hair. But we can have other people join us as well. I think we can fit 4 people in this spot. So if you want to come and join us, please click the raise hand at the bottom. Or click the join podium button right there. Buildings have been an incredibly important point. We may be at a very delicate stage where we could see events of violence happening at other campuses. Let me ask everybody, do you think this is likely to happen either at your own institution or elsewhere in the United States? And if so, how should we respond? So to the first one about the likelihood of this, think, for example, about campuses that have large numbers of undocumented immigrants. Are they likely to be targeted by ICE and the campuses resist? Perhaps a campus declare itself a sanctuary campus. Perhaps the city where it is or the state organize resistance. Or will we see alt-right groups or neo-Nazi groups have events on campus that could lead to violence like this? In terms of how people respond, what should we do? Should campuses ramp up their apprehension of social media? Should campuses change classes? Should we move more online? What do you think we should do? Again, please just use either the chat box or the text box or raise your hand to come and join us.
A lot of these people crave attention, so turning your back on them is sometimes the best strategy. And I think that's like one of the,
they're energy creature in the Star Trek parlance, right?
Right, exactly.
Well,
you might have to explain that for some of our less geeky viewers.
So it is, these are people who thrive on attention, and they will make outrageous statements. They will do terrible things in public because, in the great media dictum, there's no such thing as bad publicity for them. They want attention. They get clicks, if you will, and that's one way. The downside of this, though, is is starving the beast, in a sense, a good way of responding, or do we have the problem of not having enough information? Should we shine more light or less light?
Oh, you definitely need to have plenty of good information out there. But a lot of times good information is boring.
Yes.
Conspiracies and all of that stuff is fun and interesting stuff. I remember as a early teenager being very fascinated by all of the UFO conspiracies, and because so so it's easy to say the boogeyman is out to get you if you can develop a good boogeyman and everything is his fault or her fault as a result. And so these are very powerful narratives. This is not new things. It's just like everything else, technology makes it happen faster. And so that's the issue that we have in terms of managing or dealing with that, is that speed of communication is just happening that much faster. We've been talking about curation for years. Of course, curation is a form of censorship, if you think about it, and giving people skills.
Inclusion, exclusion, right?
Right. I mean, because you're making choices about what you include and what you leave out, and so that's you can do that for the right reasons and still get to the wrong place.
And let's include Roxanne, who is definitely in the right place.
Hi, Roxanne.
Hello, Roxanne Riskin. I think your mic is off. I think you did it.
You have the big red button. There you go.
Perfect.
There you go.
I've done that before because I have a little, my micromanager here is
hello.
wants to be with me. He's my comfort pet. It is a very hostile topic right now for our country, and I can only imagine those observing us from other countries will want to see how we handle this.
Yeah. This is definitely a case of the world is watching.
The world's eyes are watching our integrity, our reactions, our what we say, and how we handle ourselves. So we really have to think about these things as educators and as just human beings. I mean, these are horrible things that are happening right now. And I did send up a text chat thought for, I don't know if it was shown yet. I don't think so, but it was on how the search engines might perhaps alter their algorithms our students in the future reflect back on these things, and will they be looking at what revisionistic history or authentic information? Do you know what I mean, Brian? And Tom?
All history is revisionist. All history is revisionist. History is written by the victor.
But in general, yeah, we always have history as a conversation. But this is a great point about search engines. Roxanne, you're absolutely right to mention this. You think about the huge power wielded by Baidu or by Google, or of course by search engines within popular platforms like searching through Snapchat or searching through Instagram, searching through Facebook.
Well, they are right. They're actually altering their logarithms on what shows up in your search results. So are you saying, Tom, all of those are going to be revisionist results?
Well, I mean, again, anytime there's the Heisenberg Principle, but I mean, anytime you write this stuff down, you are going to be altering it because you're going to pick and choose facts based on your framework and understand and exclude things that you don't think are relevant, and emphasize things that you think are going to support your point. So every little I don't want to use the word infraction, or act of a left-wing person punching a right-wing person suddenly becomes amplified, and justification for actions on the other side, and so on and so forth. And this goes on and on and on and on. Unfortunately, the only way to really do that is to have a clear understanding is to step back and look at the statistics. There's and of course you can lie with statistics too. So now you're requiring a very advanced knowledge of how social science statistics are gathered over time. And there was the vast majority of mass murders in this country have been committed by right-wing people since the 1980s. If you look, there was a statistic that came out the other day, but some people challenge that. And so it depends on how you measure that. I mean, was the guy who drove his car into the crowd the other day a right-wing nut job, or just a nut job, or and so on and so forth? And to what extent was he a product of the environment that drove him into that, or to what extent was he just Timothy McVeigh and some crazy guy who's going to do crazy things? So I mean, it's really hard, and you have to understand that perspective matters. The facts that we understand from a distance are going to change how we look at all of those sorts of things. Charlottesville was kind of a big deal. One person died, 14 people were injured, but think about how many other people are gunned down and all this, because it's routine, right? And the media is also going to always going to go for the man bites dog story.
Let me just pause that for a second, because what you just described in many ways is a great answer to an earlier question about how higher education can react to this. And what you're describing is higher education deploying its panoply of intellectual firepower to try and understand the situation, everything from poli-sci to sociology to psychology, history. I think that's enormous. Now the question is, and Roxanne has just given us one powerful, provocative way of thinking about this, is that's always been true. What we've described has been true as long as we've had research universities for 150 years. But now, with the digital world, this is accelerated. Tom, you yourself said this is much faster. And Roxanne, you pointed out one particular aspect, which is search engines. I mean, we largely experience the world through search, and how is that going to shape and address how we respond? Thank you. So tell me the name of your puppy again. I got to hear this. What's his name or her name?
This is Kingsley, Mr. Kingsley.
Oh, Kingsley. Oh, Mr. Kingsley.
He loves your voice. He's very calm right now.
Well, that's because I love him too. But this is a powerful, this is a rich question. We have a lot of different pieces of this. A lot of them are in motion right now. And it's also important to remember these impact people's daily lives in a really material way, everywhere from our emotional, psychological well-being to, as we just found out, our physical existence. We've had a couple of comments that have come in through Twitter. And Tara,
I wonder how many. Real quick, I wonder how many historiographers work at Google.
Not enough. Over on Twitter, let's see, Mark and Vanessa just shared a document called the Charlottesville Syllabus. This is on Medium, and it is published as a zine, actually. It has a stack of sources and readings. So I'm going to share that on Twitter as well. Or you can find that on Twitter by just using the hashtag FTTE. Roxanne, Tom, stay up with us for a minute. Tara, can you flash the next test question we have so that Roxanne will tell me a whack at it. This is from Lauren Galena. Lauren asks, what can be done to promote inclusiveness and diversity in an online learning environment where brick and mortar clubs, societies, and student centers aren't an option? Oh, fantastic question, Lauren. Roxanne, do you want to take a whack at that one first?
Okay, what can be done? I'm just going to read this again. What can be done to, can you review that?
Sure, to promote inclusiveness in an online learning environment where we don't have sororities or we don't have a student center like you do in a physical bricks and mortar environment. Go ahead.
Right, I think a good way to promote inclusiveness is to really think about the responses that we typically see in online learning, like discussions, chat room, discussion boards, and maybe understand what inclusiveness means and what it doesn't mean. What doesn't inclusiveness mean? Does that mean, do you know what I mean? Can anybody define what that means? How you would understand that?
Well, right now in the United States setting, that's often described to mean being opening and supportive to populations that have been hitherto or currently discriminated against or marginalized. So that can be marginalization, discrimination for reasons of race, for gender, for religion, for sexuality, body type, and so on. And the online environment has the promise of, in a sense, obviating all of that, because the idea was, back in the 80s and 90s, that if you're online, you just are somebody, a number or a name or an ID. You could be freed of that, all that political and bodily baggage, but the reality is we can't escape that. We're still very much who we are, politically, socially, ethnically. So, if discussion boards, chat rooms, that's one way. And structuring, are you suggesting that we should structure them in a way that makes them more inclusive and more welcoming to people from underrepresented populations? Sounds like a good idea. Well, let's keep going. Tara, there are more questions here. We seem to be discovering a whole way of responding to this. Gardner has a great quote. I've heard it said this way: diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. Gardner, if your mic and camera are working, please feel free to join us up here. It'd be great to have you back up. If you don't know Gardner is from Virginia Commonwealth University, a dear friend who's been a guest on the Future Trends Forum early on in 2016. So that would be another way, I guess, Roxanne, would be to invite students to dance, invite them to participate using whatever technology we've got. Good comment. Tara, what other questions are coming in? What other text comments do we have? And again, please feel free to join us either by video. So we should have the join podium set up there. You saw that Roxanne and Tom just teleport up really, really fast. Or type in a text question. Now this is a great one. Gardner goes on, it's reported that we have a large population of the alt-right neo-Nazi activity in this area. More awareness is critical. So perhaps another thing that higher education has to do is ramp up our scholarly work in investigating neo-Confederates, neo-Nazis, and the hard right. So we need more work from historians, political scientists, sociologists, people in criminal justice, people in security studies. Now let's see if we can get Gardner up here. Gardner, I think you're
one of the things I know.
Nope. You're there.
Well, I'll say first that whoever made that last very perceptive comment was not me. So I can't take credit for that at all. That was somebody else. And And I hope they haven't plowed the worthiness
You've
of
been
the
hacked.
remark. But yeah, somebody, whoever that is, I am sorry. I hate to have you bear this face on your remarks.
You've got a great face for radio, as I say.
I was told that over and over, and after a while, I understood what I was being told. I have a story to share, if that would be helpful.
Please.
When I was Dean of University College at Virginia Commonwealth University, the call went out from the president to all the deans to consider some kind of opportunity that we might sponsor or encourage or imagine to address what at that time was the tragedy, the shooting in Ferguson and the unrest that accompanied it. And so it seems like there's about one every 3 months now, which is very, very disheartening. But I digress. We were to address this greater topic of inclusion in a way that was catalyzed by the events in Ferguson, but spread to thinking about all sorts of cultures, ethnic heritage, and so forth. So what I did after being contacted by the Vice Provost for Student Affairs with a plea, can you think of anything? A student has come in and asked me, what can he do? I thought, well, maybe one way we can do this in a way that doesn't seem like everybody sit here together and we're going to tell you the right way to think about everything, because it's important for engagement to feel authentic to everyone and not just, well, I've arrived at Sunday school and they're going to wait for me to say, because he loves us, because that's the answer to every question. Why not put together a course about safe spaces? Not the course as a safe space necessarily, but a course to examine what does it mean to learn in a safe space. And I developed the course in concert with 3 very talented faculty, one who directed the Institute for Inclusive Teaching at VCU, one who was the Associate Dean of University College, and one who was a professor in the Communications Department. We made it a 1-credit pass-fail course. We wanted it to be recognized by the institution as being of academic value. The credit hour is the currency for that. And we wanted it to be something where the threshold for participation was low, but not zero, so that people felt like if they paid a very nominal fee, they'd be able to, be part of this experience. I think it was $50, and there was aid available for anyone who needed it. So we really tried to scaffold it in a way that said, this is not just people getting together and chit-chatting. This is not a march. This is not a demonstration, but it is a serious examination of the question from multiple points of view. And we made the syllabus public. We made the learning resources public. The idea here was the school needs to be able to be very visible about what it's doing, how it's innovating, especially in an online environment in this regard. And there needs to be an opportunity for the community to be able to see this in an especially vivid way. So, and we made it open to potentially everyone on the campus. So we didn't know, would we have 20 people sign up or 20,000 people sign up? I think it ended up being around 80 or 90. It was a kind of a late add to the schedule, but that's not nothing. That's quite a large group, in fact. So the idea was to get this course underway and to have the learnings be shared, in some cases by the students, in some cases by the faculty or the speakers. And we left the syllabus and this was an idea, again, that emerged from the whole planning group, left the syllabus indeterminate after the first 2 meetings, because the first 2 meetings were going to be devoted to bringing the students into the conversation about what would a course examining the idea of safe spaces need to include. This was not surrendering the design of the course to the students, which is how it was portrayed. I'll get to that in a moment. But it was an opportunity to begin to make the subject matter of the class a problem-based learning experience from the beginning of the class, so students understood. Now, I'm not just going to sit back and hear people talk, and I'm not just going to talk. Together, we're going to create what we believe to be an authentic inquiry into this question. What does it mean to learn in a safe space? So we got it all underway, and I continue to think that it was an effective and highly innovative way of demonstrating campus commitment, but especially to give the students an opportunity to engage with these questions. But there were unanticipated consequences, and this becomes very, very interesting, and raises lots of other questions, which I won't get into, but maybe we can talk about. A very conservative talk show station in town, an AM radio station definitely of a kind of a Rush Limbaugh cast, who, as Tom said, is very much about man bite dog, because if it bleeds, it leads. We know that. They got a hold of the syllabus and spent a full hour on the radio mocking it, inviting calls from local townspeople to say, what is up with these snowflakes, willfully mischaracterizing, or perhaps they just couldn't understand what it was we were trying to do, which was not to foreclose on discussion or to advocate necessarily any single point of view. We were trying to raise the question. That's one of the things we do as academics. So that, in turn, was heard by someone in the General Assembly who helps to control funding for the school and or Virginia education generally. And that got the attention of senior leadership at VCU, who in many respects were supportive of the course, but in other respects were kind of surprised that there would be this kind of response and nervous about it. So what I guess I'd end up by saying is that the audiences that needed the most education seemed to be the people who either misunderstood or willfully mischaracterized the course on one end of the ideological spectrum, and on the other end, the institution itself, which didn't seem to have the kind of framework or had not devoted enough time to understanding what it was we were actually trying to do. I continue to think what we were trying to do was interesting and effective, although by the time we got halfway through the course, I was not in senior leadership anymore. But at the same time, I guess I won't say it's a caution. I just say it's a word that when one begins to create an authentic dialogue, that too is subject to attack, willful mischaracterization, accusations of bad faith, the whole thing. Doesn't mean we're not going to try. Doesn't mean it was a bad thing to do. But I frankly was a little surprised, and maybe that was just my naivete.
Gardner, has this been written up somewhere?
Sorry?
Has this been written up somewhere?
No.
We have a stack of questions that come in. Let me just quickly say, Gardner, thank you for that story. Because on the one hand, you give us a great example of a kind of self-aware, on-the-fly class where liberal education can do what it does best. But you're also pointing down the road to some of the risks where dialogue can become actual dialogue. Friends, just 1 second, Tom. We have a guest who's just joined us who is faculty member at UVA. She can't appear on video right now, but we can ask questions of her and she can respond via text, which we can then flash on the screen. We've done this a couple times before. I'm really conscious of her time and of course of her situation. I'd like to prioritize that if we could. This is a Professor Palmer, I believe. So if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask, again, this is a faculty member at the University of Virginia. That's Kristin Palmer. So if you have any questions, either put them on by the text chat or by come up and join us on the podium, or put them in the discussion box, and we can ask her and she'll respond. My first question for her comes from me. Isn't a question, but is a comment. I'm so sorry. This is a nightmarish experience to go through, and I'm very grateful for your time and for your attention. And I wish you the best of this. If you can join us, that's fantastic. Let's take a look and see if all the technology works. Hello, Professor Palmer.
Yeah, it's Dr. Palmer.
Hi.
I'm staff. I'm not faculty, and it's
That's
fine.
good.
I can spend as much time as you need. Like, it's great to be here.
Thank you so much.
Ironically, our board just approved in June a commemorative. We call it the Freedom Ring, or it's a public sculpture that's been developed across, we call it grounds, our campus,
Famously.
for the enslaved laborers that helped build the campus. We're going into our 200th anniversary. And so that just got approved in June.
Wow.
And when Gardner was telling the story, and Gardner's a friend of UVA, he knows UVA well, but I know that process was very, very inclusive, and members of the community participated in what that design should look like, alumni, staff, faculty, students. And so there's been a big push over the last, I'd say, 2 years, really kind of looking under the covers of UVA as an institution that was built by slaves. Thomas Jefferson being, our students find it very controversial that, he had an African-American woman that was his slave, that was also his, he had a family with, and then sold those children into slavery. And so it's been active discussions on our grounds over the last several years. And so I feel like there's been a lot of dialogue in this. I know there's been some complaints. Some professors said, well, in 1921, we accepted money from the Ku Klux Klan. And there's been some rebuttals to Terry's preparation for, anticipating violence. I pushed back on that. She, had a disaster plan with not super well formulated with Larry Sabato for making sure our students were safe. And she's been very vocal with city council on how other places in the United States have dealt with sort of this, perhaps, political symbolism, like taking down statues. So I feel it's interesting how, as a university that's part of a small town, you don't control this, the local government, and you can provide input, and you can provide your faculty scholarship on, what other cultures have done in similar circumstances, but you can't define what the city does. You can just respond, right? And so it's very unfortunate, and we're still reverberating from the events of the weekend. But if people have thoughts on how we can kind of be a pillar of how to move forward with inclusion and like all ears. I'm all ears for anything, but there was comments earlier about how it's just a bunch of stupid people, and and I have my own prejudices of people that maybe have long going to alt-right. That's naivety to think that that's the issue. There are plenty of people that are well educated and good jobs and have a very strong views of it should be aligned as a university.
Well, again, thank you for asking that question. And I hope, friends, everybody here, through whatever technology you'd like, if you could offer suggestions as well as your support to Dr. Palmer, both as a person and as a professional, but also through her for UVA. And again, use the chat box, or use the text box, or join us on stage. For example, Fred, did you want to respond to Kristin?
A couple of months ago, I was in the New Orleans area, and they were taking down statues of the Confederate era in New Orleans. And one of the things that I remember them reporting on is they were going to put the statues in a museum where they would have some sort of context to, but so they weren't simply melting the statues down and getting rid of them. I'm not sure what the story is with the statues in Charlottesville, but I was just thinking maybe that could be a hook for, so you tell the alt-right folks, well, all right, if you persist in being, outrageous, we're just going to melt the statue down. If you act with some degree of reasonableness, which maybe is impossible, but we're going to put the statue in a museum, and we're going to give it a historical context. So the statue or not.
That's one response.
And so what is the plan for the statues now?
I think it is getting So I don't know. I need to confirm. I think it's probably going to get stored. I don't believe it had any plans to be put in any sort of museum, but I'd have to double check. This was it was a city council vote. It would there wasn't participation there wasn't a large dialogue within the community beforehand, and the university was not a part of any decision making regarding what would happen to the statue, taking it down or what would happen. I think it's there has definitely been complaints about the historical significance and recognizing the history.
Yeah. So I think what they were trying to do in New Orleans was to deal with the anger people had about having these statues up in the first place, and saying, well, we're going to put it in a museum where we're going to explain all the terrible things that are, associated with the statue. But so in any event, I just, in the whole Charlottesville story, I didn't hear anything about what they planned to do with the statues, or for all I knew, they were planning on just melting them or destroying them. So anyway, that would just be my 2 bits, is to consider putting them in a museum and having the universities work on how that museum is going to present the statue and the sort of narrative that will go around the statue to explain the historical, conditions and so forth.
Thank you, Fred.
And maybe even having a story about what happened in Charlottesville, and so you can have a story about what happened when they took the statue down.
That's an important point, Kristin, about the town of Charlottesville doing that without any input from you guys and without a lot of public debate. That's it looks like a mistake in retrospect.
Yeah, 2020 hindsight, right?
Yeah.
And there were definitely other communities that this has not been as controversial, and perhaps they had different approaches that might have been more inclusive with a community dialogue, or, to Fred's point, might have had articulated better what their plans were for what they were doing with the monuments to help contextualize the historical significance of the person, without sort of encouraging people to still have that hatred or views.
So we have this key point of inclusivity and openness, which seems to be a major thread. Over in the discussion box, Lauren Galena says, fortunately, we have history books and museums teach history. Good thing. Speaking of teaching us, Jeff, I know you have to leave in a minute. Kristin, if you haven't met Jeff is, and everybody else, Jeff is a guest of the forum. He is a longtime education reporter, writer, and thinker, and is now with EdSearch. Welcome. What are you thinking?
Thanks. Yeah, I had a kind of a question I just wanted to throw out to the group, and I'm sorry I can't stay later, although I think you guys end soon anyway. But it's great to be. I really enjoy this group, and glad, Brian, you're keeping this going. This is a great way to use the forum, I think. A story that I'm working on, and I just wondered if there's anybody that wanted to contact me offline or here in this discussion. But and my address is jeff@edsearch.com. It's super easy to remember. But I just kind of looking at what happened in Charlottesville, but it's clearly there's this bigger context. And there are some scholars that I've been talking to that are looking at the role of algorithms in both kind of in spreading fake news and in allowing these kinds of groups that were the Unite the Right rally to organize. So there's this great Vice video I recommend people looking at, which Vice News did a piece from Charlottesville about, they're like really quick hit video piece. And it's some chilling stuff where they interviewed the organizers of the sort of Unite the Right. And one of the biggest sort of most memorable moments, I think, in that video is one of the Unite the Right people saying, like, we have been on the internet for a long time, and here we're finally coming out, to the real world. So there's this almost kind of the way in which, there have been these groups, as people have long known, online. And so the question then is what has been the role for these things kind of letting things bubble up, or else is there a role to help, whether it be the places like platform providers like Google and Twitter calling for them to change the way they do things, or is there a role for even universities to take a proactive role in being part of information and discussion flows? It's a tough, clearly big question. So I suspect most people I'm talking to don't have the answers. They're just kind of actively looking at that topic. So if anybody has any suggestions for people I should talk to or want to comment for the story, I'll be working on it for a little while. And I think it's a good discussion for this group too, in general, just as we think about like the context digitally.
Just one quickly is talk to Kathy O'Neill if you can reach her. She's the author of Weapons of Math Destruction and probably the best known critic of algorithms and data. That's my first thought.
Thanks. That's a great discussion. I mean, that's a great suggestion.
Well, this is a huge point, and Roxanne brought this up. I don't know if you heard this point earlier. Roxanne Riskin mentioned this, Jeff, that we think about search engines and what they'll return, both now and over time. On the Twitter, under FTTE, Mark Corbett Wilson said that if you search for Nazis in the White House, the first result is the Trump Twitter feed. The algorithms are so important. Friends, we have 2 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of Kristin Palmer. What other advice and suggestions do we have for UVA and for higher education as a whole? Kate Herzog in chat mentions a resource from a couple of days ago called, quote, "Teachers Share Resources for Addressing Charlottesville Hate Rally in the Classroom," unquote. That's an article from Ed Week, so thank you. So we've got a lot of good online resources for this. What other questions, what other comments do we have? In chat, Tom recommends that we keep talking, and I'm glad that we can do that. I can read that loud. From Roxanne, she says, when students study this event, Google or other search engines alter their algorithms to deliver queries for and from what may be defined as revisionist history based upon authentic events. One quick thought is we should wait for competing search engines and competing algorithms for people who here too. Friends, it's 3 o'clock out here on the East Coast of the United States. That means we have come to the hard stop at the end of the Future Transformed session. Every week we have 1 hour where we get to explore the future of education and technology. Every week we have dozens of us, if not hundreds, who get together and try hard to think about where this is all going. Most of the time we have a single guest. Today our guest was your collective intelligence, your collective goodwill, your collective imagination, and your collective sympathy. And from my side, I want to thank you all for that extraordinary gift. This is a hard time, and I'm glad to be able to work through it with friends like all of you. Now, before we go, we have to point towards next week as well. So next week, we shift gears to a more traditional format. We'll have a guest, a wonderful person, Colleen Campbell, who will be speaking to us, I believe, from Italy. She's the head for the OA 2020 campaign. If you don't know this is a campaign to get as much of the scholarly literature as possible in open access form by the year 2020. So if we'll have a chance to explain what that means, why that's a good thing, how it can work, and what we can do to help and why we all benefit, that'll be next week. I'm really looking forward to that. Now, in the meantime, if you don't have enough to occupy you besides the threat of neo-Nazis and thinking of open access, we have finished our book club reading. So this is the last chance you have to dive into Rainbow's End by Werner Vinge to look at where higher education could be going in the future. And of course, you had a chance to my latest book, the second edition of my new digital storytelling, is out. So you and your library should both have copies, print or digital, whichever works best for you. In the meantime, if you would like to stay in touch with us or learn more about us, go to FTTE to learn.us to learn more about the Future Trends Report. Go to shindig.com to learn more about this great technology. In the meantime, let me thank you all once more. I look forward to seeing you next week. In the meantime, take care. Be safe. Bye-bye.